Good morning. Thanks, Mike and Pam. Appreciate that intro to link to your previous learning, and we hope to have an equal impact here today. Mike mentioned that this work has some history, and so I wanted to take you back to that as the slide comes up here. A look back. 2012, 2013, Mike, along with myself, Chris Neal, who most of you know now works at DESE, and Doug Hyder, who is the executive director at MASA, came together to work with DESE in a performance-based task force and put together a report for DESE regarding this sort of work. As you can see throughout the years, we've had Missouri legislation that has come into play into this. And more importantly, we've had district initiated processes and products that have impacted this work. I won't read that to you, but it's important that you see the varying colors here because they all form this sort of tapestry that it takes in order to move these sorts of innovations forward that you discussed last time with Ray, but also more importantly, the work that you're currently doing in your districts today. All four of these areas are important to the work and in some ways necessary in order to make sure that you have both innovation, but you also have scale in the process as well. So for some of us, we've been at this for almost a decade, and we're still fighting the good fight because it's important. It's important to kids, and there's a long-term part of this. This is not a sprint; it's a marathon. And I think if you have that sort of mindset, you'll be able to navigate well, but also see the incremental opportunities for improvement along the way. And that's really what this slide represents. That there are stages of incremental improvement that are necessary to form a momentum for innovation, but also an opportunity for scaling up improvement, both in your districts as well as throughout the state. So the next slide really represents this notion of taking some of that green that you saw, this district initiated work, and bringing it more locally, particularly here to the Northland. For those of you that are outside of the Kansas City area, the Northland is that stretch around the Kansas City area that is north of the Missouri River. Kind of goes up to 435 as it makes its turn back towards KCI and forms school districts along the Highway 92 corridor of Platte County, Smithville, Kearney, and Excelsior Springs, and along the 152 corridor of North Kansas City, Park Hill, and Liberty. We have had, and I think enjoyed, a good deal of collaboration along the way with these 7 school districts, all the way back to that time frame of about 2012 when we began an online consortium and shared both resource and opportunities for improvement there. It led to what Mike referred to as the Northland CAPS. And then you've had other innovations that the districts have collaborated on, like the KC Tech Academy. As the name implies, it's very tech related in terms of its import for students that have client connected projects and the like, as well as some entrepreneurial opportunities. And then another spinoff has been Project Most for students with exceptionalities and an opportunity for them to partner with a local business here and to have an opportunity for that authentic real world experience that we want, and really represents this notion about all students being involved in this work. Be remiss if I didn't also include the opportunity to talk about our area career centers. Northland Career Center and Excelsior Springs have been key contributors over time to this notion about hands-on, authentic work, and really have elevated the opportunities for some of these other innovations, but at the same time have been able to keep their unique DNA as an area career center. And I think that's important because what this slide really represents is that this sort of district initiated innovation goes well in terms of collaboration. I'd almost say that it's a necessity in order to be able to do that. Think about board members connecting in a network with other board members, and you have like initiatives and mindsets. The same is true, obviously, for superintendents, your principals and the like. This sort of networking and collaboration really spawns the opportunity for innovation to occur, but more importantly, for it to scale, which is what we really want in terms of the impact and effect on all students. At this point, I'll turn it over to my good friend and colleague, Dr. Jeremy Tucker.
Thanks, Dr. White. I think that's a good segue into the quote you see on this slide. And it's something that we've leaned on over the course of the last 8 years, having joined Liberty Public Schools culture. And it simply states, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, which is really kind of an exclamation to the value of collaboration, and that we could not be where we are as a region or as a school district without walking this journey together. There are a couple folks that I want to recognize in addition to Dr. White, Dr. Jennifer Kopp, who you'll hear from in a little bit from Kearney, Dr. Julie Moore from Liberty Public Schools. A shout out to one of our innovation and learning coaches that's part of this work group. That is Carrie Gabriel, who does a lot of the work behind the scenes, as well as a student on our call from Liberty High School, and that's Grace Guillaume. If they happen to be in your work group a little bit later on, be sure to ask them lots of questions and grill them as far as the work happening in our districts. I want to anchor back to some of the work that we saw last time we were together. And really, in Liberty Public Schools, we subscribe to a success model where we don't necessarily pick one particular turnkey approach, but instead we canvas a lot of different approaches and try to make the best of that into our own. And so last time we were together, I know from Ray McNulty, you saw this model of this innovation and diffusion model, and how you oftentimes have early adopters, but then you have those that kind of want to see it at work and at play first, and then those that are going to be resistors. That has certainly been true for us in this work. In addition, you heard mention the value of navigating polarities, and I know Dr. Hedgepath mentioned that as well this morning. That has proven useful for us in years past, certainly during the course of the pandemic, where we have no shortage of opinions. We've focused on this particular model in advancing a variety of scenarios, approaching scenario planning from our board table all the way down to our leaders and administrators in our classrooms. In addition to the VUCA model, we incorporated another model referred to as the Cynefin framework. If you're not familiar with that, I would encourage you to take a look at it. And it's really trying to make sense out of disorder, where oftentimes we live in this space of navigating simple items or complicated items. But we all know in the last several years, we have certainly shifted over to more complex areas as far as our work and our society, and then certainly living within that chaos space as well. So I would encourage you to become familiar with that. The other example that was mentioned by Fred Bramante, and I was glad to see him pull this forward, and this was the work in New Hampshire that takes the very best of the classroom and then incorporates that digital or virtual or online element. And then finally, the third category of experiential, where New Hampshire used this model to work toward the apex. We've also subscribed to that model in Liberty Public Schools, and we'll share a little bit about that here in just a while. So my transition to Liberty was back around 8 years ago, and the district had just recently approved a strategic plan. And if you're a superintendent, many of you know in that first year, you're probably going to be focusing on a strategic plan, whereas I didn't necessarily have to do that. Instead, I had to operationalize the recently adopted strategic plan. But at the same time, I wanted to try to cast a vision. And for those of you that know me, and I've worked with many of you, it's not been a solely developed vision as far as me casting that vision and asking everyone to subscribe, but instead it's been a collaborative journey through a series of questions. That first question was simply this: what does it mean to be learner-centered? And we began to unpack that question with the concentric circles model, with the learner at the center, surrounded by the educational system, and then finally the support of that community. As we asked this question throughout our community and our leadership team, a series of vision priorities developed that complemented our strategic plan, but also painted a picture for the future and where we were heading as a district. Out of that came the vision priorities of relationships, informed decision-making, personalization, learner agency, growth mindset. Keep in mind, that was about 8 years ago, and we've learned a lot in every single one of these areas. At the same time we were casting those vision priorities, we were opening a choice school in Epic Elementary, and we were beginning to think about in year one, what are the takeaways that we want to develop out of that school setting that then can bleed over into our traditional environments across all grade levels and across all content areas. If you paid attention to your pre-reading, I included a document that's entitled A Transformation Vision for Education in the United States by a group called Education Reimagined. And I stumbled into that work, and what I found was it was elevating certain skills and dispositions and areas of focus that really complemented or converged with our vision priorities, the areas we wanted to expand throughout our district through Epic Elementary. And it included competency-based learning, personalized, relevant, contextualized, learner agency, socially embedded, and open-walled focuses. What we quickly discovered, there were a lot of links to our vision priorities in the work at Epic, but there were also some areas that we weren't quite ready for. And so those were kind of shelved for a period, but then we quickly began to think about them and that, that's further out on the horizon, and that's something we might want to keep our eye on. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. So I would encourage you, if you've not had a chance to read that document, to dive in that transformational vision, and that it shares a lot in the narrative form about where we are and some of the networking that we did along the way. I'd be remiss if I didn't add the focus of our Board of Education as an additional enabling factor, and really their emphasis on their own learning and their professional development, whether it's going and visiting a school district, working with business partners, or incorporating a variety of educational resources from book studies to professional development opportunities on the side of the board table. The next piece then was really looking further out on that horizon. And we entitled this That Edge of Vision, where we had our vision priorities, but there were a few things that we weren't quite ready for, but nonetheless, we began talking about them. So we leveraged some of the literature from that transformational vision for education. We found or came across a resource entitled Scaling on the Edges from Deloitte. A friend shared that with me. And it talked about innovation in a sense of taking the core of your organization and continuing to refine your work, while at the same time piloting on the periphery until the point where that particular pilot or program is proven to be successful, and then that becoming integrated into your core. So as we read and we studied about that as a leadership team, we landed on this next piece, which is going to be familiar to you, and that is that edge of vision. At around this same time, we took a trip to New Hampshire, several of our leaders in the state of Missouri, and this particular piece that Fred shared the other day, but I first stumbled into about 8 years ago, resonated with me, and it connected all the dots for me as a former history teacher. That's why I was pretty excited to hear him mention that the other day. Fast forward, just prior to the pandemic, we went through a strategic planning process. We asked another simple question, and that question was this: what does it mean to thrive? Working with a consultant, we had a variety of strategic planning meetings and stakeholder meetings and gatherings, focus groups, a World Cafe, a variety of surveys, as you would do in a strategic planning process. But that culminated in a couple of key pieces for our system. We moved away from a traditional vision and mission statement to these two documents that you see here. That's a vivid vision and then our graduate profile. That vivid vision is an effort to try to create a narrative of where we want to be and where we see ourselves in the future around a couple of key areas. Those areas captured within our strategic plan lead with that area of learning in terms of what we want to occur in our classrooms as well as for our students, teaching, leadership, professional learning for the adults in the organization, and then lastly, the role that the community has to play. Conversely, our graduate profile was an effort to try to garner input from our community, our parents, our businesses, our families, in and around those skills and dispositions that they want to have their students experience while they're in school, but then also to equip them for success beyond high school and college and career or in life. It's in the category of academic, cultural, personal, professional, entrepreneurial, followed by each of those explicit skills that are captured there. In your pre-reading, you had some of this information as well as a link to our website that includes a variety of videos from student testimonials as their experiences develop in support of this graduate profile. The last thing that I want to mention, and then we'll turn it over to our other leaders, is our Agile strategy map. And this is our areas of focus within our strategic plan in support of that vivid vision within these categories, as you see. As you read through those, you'll see a couple of key ingredients that fit with the Success Ready work group that we're focused on this spring, from competency-based learning to that agency element, real-world learning, micro-credentialing, the professional development work to support all of this, project-based learning, flexible scheduling, and readiness networks. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Julie Moore to walk us through a little bit more detail on our competency-based learning efforts.
Thank you, Dr. Tucker. The work in Liberty around our strategic plan works to infuse real-world learning into the classroom at all levels, pre-K through 12, as we attempt to focus on the skills in our portrait of a graduate. We believe that competency-based learning is how students can demonstrate the transfer of skills between disciplines using real-world learning as the vehicle. In Liberty, our elementary schools have been using proficiency scales to show progress toward learning. At the middle level in high school, we're piloting the work of competency-based as teachers continue to work together to find cross-curricular opportunities to demonstrate learning. The students and parents have been instrumental part of this process. Students need to know how to transfer skills between disciplines, how to use those skills in real-world learning opportunities. And we've really found that both parents and students need to understand the why of competency-based. And Jennifer is going to share a little bit about what Kearney is doing. Maybe, or we can go on to the next slide if you want to do that.
Okay.
We'll do that.
Sorry.
So, there you are.
Can you go back?
Sorry.
I'll go ahead and share this one. So this is, if you go back, the grading scales on slide 12 are examples of just the scales that we're currently using in Liberty. And we expect them to change as we kind of learn and refine our work, but students are expected to provide evidence that they are proficient in the competency and learning intentions. These are some examples you see below from middle school. At the high school level, students were engaged in the naming of the categories to help them take ownership. So you can see that there's a little bit of a difference. So again, we hope to maybe refine that a little bit. At the high school level, the students in our EDGE micro school helped come up with some of the wording that they wanted to use. And they said they liked the ING words. And so you see beginning, approaching, and then all the way to transferring in that process.
Can we jump back to Dr. Kopp real quick to round out what Kearney's focused on?
Sure. I'm sorry about that. Yes, at our elementary schools this year, we have been immersed in working on shifting from our standards-based work and implementing proficiency skills and competency-based all through the elementary. All of our teachers are involved in this work, so they all have that in-depth understanding. And we are currently working on our portrait of a graduate with expected completion of the task force work in April of identifying those key competencies. Then this June and July, we'll be working with the folks at Getting Smart to prepare for our competency-based work. So much when we started all of our real world learning initiatives, so much of it was focused on our high school students. And I still believe that's the way we had to start with this initiative. In the last year and a half, we've worked hard to make sure things are in place for our students to be successful as they pursue these real world learning opportunities. We are now shifting to make this a truly cohesive K-12 initiative. So you can see up in the corner of the screen, we have our portrait of a graduate, and this is truly going to be our guiding North Star. Currently, our task force is working on solidifying these key competencies, and then our teacher teams will take these key competencies from the task force, and they are going to identify the characteristics as well as those true practical applications. And we are going to do this K-12. We want a very fluid, cohesive system. So at our elementaries, we are expanding project-based learning into all of our elementaries, and we are going to have units that are all connected to our career pathways. We are also bringing in our community partners all the way down to our kindergarten students. We're bringing in our community partners to be resources so that all of our elementary students are exposed to different career opportunities. This work is going to progress through the middle school, still connecting our project-based learning to our high school pathways. We're bringing in our community partners. Our middle school is partnering with our high school. Our high school students come to the middle school, they share the CTE experiences and opportunities. And then of course, once they're ready to move on to high school, they're going to select their pathways, they're going to develop their ICAP, and they're going to work to obtain at least one MVA prior to graduation. At this point, our community partners become our business partners who will utilize our students to participate in internships and client-connected projects. There's just, there's a lot of excitement around real-world learning within our community. And honestly, in such a polarized time, this seems to be one thing that everyone in our community is truly excited about.
As you heard from Dr. White, in and around the collaboration in the Northland and then the examples from both Liberty and Kearney, you can see we're at different stages, but hardly a week goes by where we're not on the phone one with another, asking questions or sharing ideas. But then beyond that, just as you have your individual learning networks, we've talked about how can we as a school system think about our own learning network. We came across that idea in a text or a book entitled Better Together, who you're going to hear from the author here a little bit later on with Tom Vander Ark. But just to give you a sense of our learning network, here are some examples. It's not just the Northland, it's our entire region that's doing a lot of this work together, both on the Missouri side of Kansas City, but then also on the Kansas side. As Dr. Kopp mentioned, it couldn't happen without collaboration with our business and community partnerships, and then some more formal relationships with organizations that we've vetted and brought forward for our board's consideration, like Education Advisory Board, others that simply serve as thought partners like Education Reimagine or Digital Promise, but then expanding our professional learning network, leveraging our RPDCs, and then groups like Aurora Institute, Getting Smart, and Kauffman Foundation, who you'll hear from a little bit later on. And then as we think about other areas in the future, higher education has a role to play. And we're fortunate in the Northland to have several universities. One in our backyard between us and Kearney is William Jewell College, and exploring opportunities that exist with them.
And continuing with the theme of collaboration and building partnerships, many of you might know that there is a very strong and vibrant collaboration going on in the 6-county metro area in Kansas City that includes both Missouri and Kansas school districts. And you see on the left-hand side of your screen there, This depicts over 30 school districts that have come together to work on experiences that are true and authentic to students to make them future ready. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the guiding question is, what Kansas City high school graduates need to be ready for the future? Obviously, it is the intersection of work, education, and life lessons. And we do that through a variety of experiences and through a variety of partners that you will both learn from and hear from here in a few minutes. This has all been coalesced into identifying 4 particular opportunities that exist for our students. Those are represented at the bottom of the page: work experiences, college credit, IRCs, and entrepreneurial experiences. These form what we refer to as market value assets. You'll hear more about that in a minute from our partners from Kaufman and Getting Smart, but an opportunity again to collaborate innovation so that it can scale. And what I want you to know about this particular initiative that we are involved in is that it has a very specific goal that is absolutely attainable. But by 2030, those districts that you see represented there in the green, blue, and yellow will have 75,000 graduates that will achieve one of those MVAs that we just talked about upon their graduation. Yes, it's a lofty goal. Yes, it will take a lot of work to get there. But this momentum that has begun since 2012, culminating in what you're seeing today, but also extending into what you will hear in a few minutes, is the opportunity that makes this both doable, but a great experience and opportunity for all students.
So as you've heard, our work with real world learning and our portrait of a graduate can't just be at the high school level. In Liberty, we've seen EPIC, along with other elementary schools, use PBL as the vehicle for having students demonstrate the skills and dispositions within our graduate profile. Our teachers build empathy through innovation. This occurs through activities such as supporting local harvesters with school gardens, learning about sustainable resources, and creating hunger awareness within our community. Their goal is to create leaders of today and tomorrow. Our newest program at Warren Hills, called Redesign, has combined 2nd through 5th graders in Cougar Cafes in an effort to build a community within a school and have students take ownership of their learning throughout the day. Finally, I would add that the PLTW launch edition in K-5 has been a tremendous success for us this year. The program empowers students to adopt a design thinking mindset through projects and problems that build upon each other and relate to the world around them. Students engage in the hands-on activities in computer science, engineering, biomed science. They become creative, collaborative problem solvers ready to take on any challenge. And at the middle school level, all of the middle schools in Liberty have found a way to approach real world learning a little bit differently. HMS by Design is one example of a micro school that focuses on personalized learning, community connections, future ready skills, and PBL. They've had many opportunities to engage in client connected projects with businesses across Kansas City. Our other 3 middle schools are engaging in interdisciplinary units and classes that engage students in lessons that focus on academic, cultural, and personal growth. And then our students at the high school level have opportunities like they've never had before. Students can travel to the career centers that Dr. White mentioned earlier, Casey Tech Academy, to get hands-on experience in a trade they enjoy, or they can engage in an internship through NCAPS, Network 53 in Liberty, or beyond KSD and Kearney. Jennifer is going to discuss more about those in a minute. In Liberty, we have also created micro schools at each of our high schools. EDGE was established this year at Liberty High School, and it's a globally focused micro school. Real world problems are the center of learning. Learning from each subject area is woven together to allow learners to understand how math, science, social studies, English, etc. apply to real world problems. The learning is student driven. Take a role in setting goals, choosing and designing their projects, planning their day, and choosing how to show evidence of their learning. EDGE really gives learning opportunities to explore and connect internationally. Making these opportunities accessible to learners from all backgrounds is part of the mission of the micro school. And then finally, I would add the math personalized learning plan is a great example of students moving through learning at their own pace in classes such as algebra and geometry. As they provide evidence of mastery toward the learning intentions, they move on to the next unit. It's truly a personalized path toward learning.
Yes, and as Dr. Moore and Dr. White talked about before, all of the opportunities throughout the Northland is provided through collaborative efforts. Our kids have so many opportunities that no one school district could possibly offer on their own. Regardless if our students want to pursue college after high school, or if they want to enter directly into the skilled trades workforce, there are so many opportunities in the Northland to help prepare students for their future. You can see listed, we have the 2 career centers that just have various pathways that our kids can choose from. We also in the Northland, the consortium that Dr. White referred to earlier, we have Northland CAPS, which is the Center for Advanced Professional Studies. And this program has been successful because of this collaborative effort in the Northland schools. For those of you who haven't heard of Northland CAPS, this is a program that provides students with professional and authentic, relevant experiences. Classes are housed in businesses throughout the Northland. High school juniors and seniors from the participating districts get to have these real world learning opportunities. All full year students and second year students participate in immersive internships with business partners throughout the Kansas City area. Our Northland schools also participate in the early college program, where students spend half their day taking college classes and then being in the high school the other half of the day. And of course, all of these opportunities lead our students to earning their market value assets, which Dr. White referred to earlier, which prepares them more as they leave the walls of our schools.
So then as we think about everything that you've heard in and around assessment or competency-based learning or real-world learning, we probably need to look at measures differently, particularly as we hear from our business community, as we hear from parents in terms of rethinking the value of standardized assessments and other items that are important to us. So in our district, we've talked about or titled it Uncommon Measures, and have a couple screenshots of a scorecard that we've been working on over the course of the last 3 years. It still focuses on academic, certainly, and we want to do well on those standardized assessments at the end of the year, but that's not the only academic measure that we value. We certainly want to focus on a student's growth from August to May, which comes in the form of a lot of our interim assessments like iReady or NWEA. And so that's that first category. We've also spent a lot of time focusing on social emotional learning. Like many of you, we've incorporated Panorama over the years and been able to get a sense of where our students are at related to those various competencies that are assessed by utilizing Panorama. The last category, as you can see, is real world learning and looking at our data to gauge how we are approaching that goal of 100% of our graduates having at least one market value asset. Our scorecard is pretty lengthy in Liberty. It's about 7 pages long. These are just 3 examples as I've shared on the screen. But the other thing we've tried to do is we think about MSIP 6, we're working on how we anchor our existing scorecard or these uncommon measures to what we're beginning to see that will take effect with MSIP 6 as we move over the course of these next several years.
And we were just showing this information because Kearney, we do, and Liberty, we have very high academic standards, expectations. And there was a point when we were beginning this work that we were fearful that as we move this direction, that some of our assessments could take a dip. And we were really prepared for that. But honestly, that hasn't happened. You can look at the chart that shows in 2020, 45% of our kids were earning an MVA, at least one MVA upon graduation. And this year, we're projecting that 75% of our kids will earn an MVA. And we have not seen that dip. We have been able to keep those high academic standards. We truly believe that when students are allowed to pursue their passion, they're just more content and successful in all aspects. And this whole process, we've changed a lot of things. Most of all, the mindset of how we are attacking education. So it's been a mindset shift from the top down. We've put processes and policies in place to support this work. This work is front and center as part of our strategic planning. As we're looking at our budget and staffing needs, we are considering how to shift to best support this work. We have shifted to a tiered diploma, which beginning with the class of 2025, it will require all of our students to earn a market value asset upon graduation. It is a graduation requirement. We have adopted the Latin system so that all students can pursue their passion without giving up recognition for the work they've done. So truly everything we're doing, we are looking at this real world learning work and how what we are currently doing, how we can make those shifts to best support the work.
Dr. Moore, you want to walk us through this piece?
Sorry, I was on mute. We're excited about what the future holds for Liberty and Kearney. As Jennifer mentioned, by the year 2025, all students will graduate with at least one MBA as part of their graduation requirement. We continue to create more opportunities for students to earn market value assets and demonstrate the skills in the portrait of a graduate, so they're ready for whatever they choose to do upon graduation. Our current work is focused on creating an extended transcript or learner record for students that will showcase the badges earned throughout their time in Liberty and Kearney, as well as micro-credentialing the skills tied to our portrait of a graduate. We believe all these efforts will result in classrooms where those skills rather than content is the focus, and learning is seamless across content areas and experiences.
So to kind of draw this to a conclusion, one of the graphics that we use in conversations with our community is this graphic from a design firm by the name of Gaping Void. And I love this graphic because it's kind of how my mind works and what my brain looks like. But hopefully you've been able to make some connections with your respective roles, whether you're a parent or student or educational leader, or your school or your district or your business, to some of the things that we've shared this morning during this time in terms of elevating the work within your district, showcasing the work, but then also informing some thinking as we move forward over the course of this spring and our remaining convenings. So we landed on this next question that then will lead us into our breakout session. So I will turn it back over to Dr. Hedgepeth and thank our team for their work in putting this presentation together.